My name is Claire Bennett, and the day my father threw me out of his house, he didn't just take away my home, he took away the only family I thought I had. I was 27 years old, standing in our driveway with a single backpack, a cracked suitcase, and exactly $43 in my wallet. My father didn't yell. He didn't cry. Somehow that made it worse. He simply looked at me with cold, emotionless eyes and said, "You were never strong enough to carry this family. Don't come back until you've become someone worth remembering." Then he shut the front door. I stood there for what felt like forever, hoping it would open again. It never did. The curtains moved slightly. I knew my younger brother was watching. My stepmother stood beside him, wearing the same satisfied smile she'd worn ever since she convinced my father that I was nothing more than a burden. Not one person came outside. Not one person called my name. At that moment, I realized something heartbreaking. I hadn't lost my house. I had lost my family. That night, I slept on a wooden bench at a nearly empty bus station. The November wind cut through my thin jacket, and every passing hour made me wonder if my father had ever loved me at all. As I stared at the ceiling, I remembered something my late mother used to tell me whenever life became difficult. The people who underestimate you often become the ones who fear your success. Back then, I thought those words were just comforting advice. I had no idea they would become a prophecy, because 5 years later, my life looked completely different. The daughter my father had called worthless would build a business that changed thousands of lives. The woman he abandoned with $43 would become one of the youngest entrepreneurs in the state, and the family who erased my name from their lives would soon be fighting to get it back. But none of them knew the truth. They didn't know what I had sacrificed. They didn't know how many nights I cried myself to sleep. They didn't know how close I came to giving up. All they saw was the success. They never saw the scars that built it. And then, on a rainy Monday morning, as I looked through the glass walls of my office, I saw a familiar figure standing nervously outside the building. His hair had turned gray. His shoulders were bent. His expensive confidence was gone. For the first time in my life, my father looked afraid. For a long moment, I couldn't move. The man standing outside my office looked nothing like the father I remembered. 5 years earlier, he had been proud, confident, and convinced he controlled everyone's future. Now, his expensive suit had been replaced by a faded jacket, and the confidence in his eyes had been replaced with desperation. He looked defeated. I slowly closed the file on my desk and stepped away from the window before he could see me. My assistant knocked gently on the door. "Ms. Bennett," she said. "There's a gentleman downstairs asking to see you. He says he's your father." The word father echoed through my mind, a title he had abandoned long before I ever did. I took a deep breath. "Tell him I'm in a meeting," I replied calmly. She nodded and left. As the door closed, memories I had spent years trying to bury came rushing back. My childhood hadn't always been filled with pain. When my mother was alive, our home was warm. She believed in kindness, hard work, and forgiveness. Every birthday, she'd bake my favorite chocolate cake and tell me, "Claire, never let anyone decide your worth." Then everything changed. She passed away after a long illness when I was 16. Within a year, my father remarried. At first, I tried to welcome my stepmother, hoping we could become a family again. Instead, she slowly turned every conversation into a competition, every mistake into proof that I wasn't good enough. Nothing I did was ever enough. If I earned good grades, my brothers were better. If I worked late to help pay the bills, I was told it was expected. If I had a dream, it was called unrealistic. Little by little, my father stopped listening to me. Eventually, he stopped seeing me altogether. The final blow came after my grandmother passed away. She had quietly left me a small piece of land on the edge of town. It wasn't worth much at the time, but it was the only thing she ever owned. My father wanted me to sign it over to him. "It's for the family," he insisted. When I refused, everything changed. He accused me of being selfish. My stepmother called me greedy. My brother refused to speak to me. 3 days later, I was standing outside the front door with a backpack, $43 and nowhere left to go. At the time, I thought they had taken everything from me. What I didn't know was that the small piece of land my grandmother had protected for me would become the first piece of a future none of them could ever imagine. For months, I survived one day at a time. I worked the morning shift at a small cafe, cleaned offices at night, and spent every spare hour learning everything I could about business from free library books and online courses. There were nights when I was so exhausted that I fell asleep with my laptop still open. But giving up was never an option. Whenever I wanted to quit, I remembered my father's final words. Don't come back until you've become someone worth remembering. Those words no longer hurt. They fueled me. One afternoon, while visiting the small piece of land my grandmother had left me, I noticed something unusual. The neighborhood around it was changing rapidly. New roads were being built. Construction crews were everywhere, and local businesses were beginning to move into the area. Most people saw an empty lot. I saw an opportunity. Instead of selling the land, I used it as collateral to secure a small business loan. It was a terrifying decision. If I failed, I would lose the last gift my grandmother had ever given me. But if I succeeded, everything could change. I opened a tiny logistics company with just one second-hand delivery van and 2 employees. During the first year, I handled customer service, accounting, deliveries, and even cleaned the office myself after everyone went home. There were countless setbacks. A major client canceled their contract. The van broke down twice in 1 month. More than once, I wondered if my father had been right about me. Then, something unexpected happened. A regional manufacturer was desperate for a reliable logistics partner after another company failed to deliver an important shipment. They took a chance on my small business. We didn't just meet the deadline. We delivered ahead of schedule. Within months, referrals started pouring in. One client became 10. 10 became 50. Before I knew it, the tiny company I had built from, nothing had grown into a thriving business with offices across the state. The same people who once ignored my calls were now asking for meetings. Reporters wanted interviews. Business magazines featured my story. But I never mentioned my family. As far as the world knew, I had built my success alone. Then one morning, my assistant walked into my office with an uneasy expression. "Claire," she said quietly, placing a folder on my desk. "I think you should see this." Inside were financial records, bankruptcy filings, and one familiar name, Bennett Construction, my father's company. The business he had always claimed would stay in the family forever was only weeks away from collapse, and for the first time in 5 years, I finally understood why he had come looking for me. I closed the folder and sat in silence. 5 years ago, I had stood outside my father's house with nothing but a backpack and $43. Now he was the one running out of time. My assistant looked at me carefully. "Should I send him away again?" she asked. I thought about it for a moment. Then I smiled. "No," I replied. "Ask him to come up." A few minutes later, the office door slowly opened. My father stepped inside. He looked around at the glass walls, the city skyline, and the name on the office door. Claire Bennett, founder and CEO. For a long moment, he couldn't say a word. His eyes filled with disbelief. I never imagined," he whispered. I calmly gestured toward the chair across from my desk. "Please, have a seat." He lowered his head before speaking. "My company is failing. The bank is taking everything. Your brother left months ago, and your stepmother, she filed for divorce when the debts became too much." The room fell silent. Then he looked up at me with tears in his eyes. "I made the biggest mistake of my life, Claire. I should have believed in you. I should have protected you. Instead, I pushed you away." He swallowed hard. "I'm not here because you owe me anything. I'm here because I'm asking for something I don't deserve. A second chance." For years, I had imagined this exact moment. I thought revenge would feel like victory, but looking at the broken man sitting across from me, I realized something. Success had already been my revenge. I didn't need to humiliate him. I simply needed to protect the life I had built. I opened a drawer and placed a document on the table. "This isn't a check," I said. "It's an offer." He looked at it with shaking hands. "I'll buy Bennett Construction, pay every employee what they're owed, and keep their jobs safe. But the company will no longer belong to the Bennett family." He slowly nodded. "I understand. And one more thing," I continued. "My forgiveness is free. My trust is not." Tears rolled down his face. "I'm sorry, Claire." For the first time in years, I believed he truly meant it. Months later, Bennett Construction became part of my company, and not a single employee lost their job. As for my father, we started over, not as the family we once were, but as two people trying to heal from the past. Some wounds leave scars that never disappear, but those scars remind us how far we've come. The greatest victory isn't making the people who hurt you suffer. It's building a life so full of purpose that their rejection no longer defines your future. And that was the second chance we both needed. Subscribe to this channel if you want more interesting story videos. Thanks for watching.